Firefighters across the state are sounding the alarm about a possible change to OSHA regulations. The Firefighters Association of New York reports the proposed changes would have numerous negative impacts on fire departments. Some of those changes include proposed changes, more than doubling the hours of basic training, upgrading medical screenings, and other administrative changes. FASNY held a press conference to raise awareness about these proposals. Leaders say these rules could close countless departments statewide.
Communities will have to make some tough decisions. Will they have to close the doors of the volunteer fire departments? Increase taxes to try to comply with these new regulations? Or operate outside of the new federal standards, which would leave themselves open to fines, citations, and civil liability.
The association says not only would these changes impact the departments financially, but obviously it would impact you, residents, statewide.
And here to talk more about this is the president of FASNY, Edward Tace Jr., and Dave Deniston, who has a very long but important title. Dave, I'm going to let you tell me which agency you represent.
We're with the National Volunteer Fire Council and head up the task force on the OSHA proposed OSHA regulation.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you guys for being leaders of this critically important part of all of our communities. Let's talk about some of the impact that these new regulations by OSHA could have. First, explain to the folks out there, they may hear OSHA and they might think regulations. What is OSHA and what could these new regulations do to firefighters?
So OSHA is a federal agency that proposes rules and regulations that various workers across the country would have to follow. Here in New York State, our volunteer firefighters would have to follow that the same as career firefighters because of the way that we've been designated here in New York.
And that's a big difference because you've got career firefighters who are what? More full-time, correct? And they get paid, they sleep at the firehouses, and then there are volunteers. Could you do you know what the percentage is around Western New York between those career versus the volunteer? Because most companies are volunteer, aren't they?
They are. In New York State, we have approximately 80,000 volunteer firefighters, representing 1,700 departments across the state.
Wow. Okay, so this will impact both, but I'm thinking in my head, and you guys can change, my mind here, it will probably impact the volunteers a little bit more because you're already really struggling with getting volunteers in the door. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When you look at a lot of the proposed changes, again, with a career fire service, you've got people that are there, they're getting paid to be there, they're on shift. They have a lot more time to devote to some of these new requirements. The volunteers were already asking them to leave their jobs, leave their families, leave their sporting events to come down and help a member of the community when they're troubled or in need. So to ask them for additional hours on top of that to meet just the administrative and the paperwork portions of this, those numbers are astronomical.
I feel like sometimes the state also takes maybe one step forward and two steps back, especially as it pertains to these types of regulations. We had someone in from a volunteer company, I believe it was Snyder in the town of Amherst, talking about recruiting and the difficulties, the challenges they were having, and other volunteer fire departments. And the state was trying to make it easier for people to get trained, to follow those regulations. And now these regulations are even going that much higher. Can volunteers catch up?
No. Not in today's world. It's unfortunate. A lot of the rural fire departments that we have in Western New York and across New York State, these departments run on $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year budget. It comes from small communities. With this new OSHA regulations rules, they're not going to be able to do that with that kind of money. So somebody's got to come up with the funding, whether it's the federal government or it's the local municipalities. That's what we're trying to do with these conferences that we're doing, is to educate the public that we have already spoken many times to OSHA and to the comment period, but we need to get the public involved. They can only hear from us so many times.
Okay, so tell me, how can people get involved in this, and what is the timeline here on these proposals?
So right now, the public comment period is open until July 22nd. They can go to the Federal Register. They can go to www.fasny.com, and on there is a link to make a public comment. We're encouraging people, tell your story, tell what your tax base is, tell what your community looks like and how this will impact. Because we believe OSHA has, when they put the information together, they believe that the average volunteer accommodation department in this country has a budget of $1.7 million. I can tell you my district's $280,000. We're a long way from $1.7 million, so this would be a substantial substantial increase to our taxpayers.
We hope that in the future, maybe the state would step in and perhaps make local companies whole for some of these regulations if the federal government doesn't step in and relax some of them. But what happens? Let's say this public comment period comes and goes in July. These regulations start. What could happen to our local volunteer companies?
Well, unless they abide by the rules and regulations that are in the rule, they could start being fined, citations for not doing it. They're going to spend up time in court, and God forbid, they could say, well, we're not going to abide by the rule, okay? And then there's a loss of life or property damage, and then you're in liability, you're in citations. So it's serious, very serious here. We need to understand the service that the volunteer fire service saves New York State. We save New York State over $4 billion a year in tax savings. So where would they be without the volunteer fire service?
Oh, absolutely. And tell me, how exactly is this going to impact residents with, taxes could go up? And obviously, if fire departments close, volunteer fire departments close because they can't meet these mandates, they can't get volunteers in the door, that's going to impact residents greatly. You never know when you need a firefighter at your door.
It's going to impact them in two ways. Number one, the closest fire department will be further away, so we're talking about longer response times. But number two, it could affect taxpayers' insurance rates, because when you look at the insurance, they look at how close is the local fire department. If we move that away from that residence, obviously their insurance rates are going to go way up. So it's going to have a huge impact. It's going to have a double whammy. Number one, in the taxes that they're going to have to pay, and then number two, in the insurance rates. And the worst one of all is the longer response times when I've got an emergency to get somebody to my house to take care of it.
Yeah.
All really, really good points. Gentlemen, before we let you go, what is the best place for folks to go to leave their comment and to participate before the deadline, July 22nd?
So again, you can go to www.fasny.com, and there's a link there which will take you to the Federal Register. That's the other place. If you Google Federal Register, look for OSHA 1910-156, and then you can leave a comment there as well. But reach out to us. We can help you get connected. It's really important that we get those public comments in.
Okay, so I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to go back to my desk. Yep. I'm going to find that link. I'll put it on WIVB.com. Go to the Found It on 4 tab. Give me 10 minutes, okay?
It'll be
and
up there.
I'll do it.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Edward Tace Jr. and Dave Denniston, guys, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the leadership that you provide for this service in our communities.
Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for putting that up on the website.
Absolutely.
We truly appreciate the support.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's get a look at that hot forecast.